That's the power of coming out. When you come out, you show people how normal it is to be queer. Hello all you beautiful people, I'm Ms. Sally Pride, that's with 3 Z's and a Y, because why not? And in this video I'm going to be talking about Spider-Man. Specifically, I'm going to be talking about coming out and the great power and responsibility that comes with it. So I'm going to talk about the original trilogy of Spider-Man movies with Tobey Maguire. I'm going to be talking about the 2 movies in the Amazing Spider-Man series with Andrew Garfield. I'm going to be talking about Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, and I'm going to watch all the MCU films that feature Tom Holland as Spider-Man. So that includes Captain America Civil War, Spider-Man Homecoming, Avengers Infinity War, Avengers Endgame, Spider-Man Far From Home, and Spider-Man No Way Home. So I'm going to talk all about those movies and what they mean for coming out. And you might learn a thing or two if you're interested in coming out, if you've already come out, or you want to be a supportive ally to people who are coming out. If you like Spider-Man, this video is going to be great. So to make this more interesting, I'm going to tier rank all the Spider-Man films, and at the end, I'm going to also talk about which Spider-Man is my favorite and why. I'm trying out a new mic and audio system for this video, so if you like it, please let me know in the comments. Oh, and spoilers, by the way. Let's get started with Spider-Man, starring Tobey Maguire. So Peter Parker is an unpopular high school student in a school in which everyone, including himself, has been held back for like 10 years. So they go on a field trip and Peter gets bitten by a radioactive spider. And when he's bit by this spider, he goes through various changes, sort of like puberty, and that's sort of the joke they're going for. He feels shamed and embarrassed that no one's ever gone through what he's gone through, which in his case may be true. And then he learns he can use webs to sling himself everywhere. In the comics and all other iterations of Spider-Man, webs do not come out of his wrists. They have to be put there, like through a lab. May I just point out something a little strange here? When he's trying this thing out, he could easily get caught, because he's not wearing a costume or anything, he's just flying from building to building without a suit on. Like, seriously, dude? Like, you think you could try harder at this? And then, even when he does this, he says, Shazam! Which is one of 2 references to DC Comics in this film. Peter gets into a fight with Flash Thompson and, like, has incredible reflexes and everything. And he gets in trouble because, well, he got into a fight. And there's this discussion there of, well, why did he do it? Peter is ultimately afraid of coming out. This is what the root of the problem is. That society is not going to treat him well when he comes out as Spider-Man, if he ever does. So he has to hide, even from his aunt and uncle. Peter can't be with MJ, and he feels like he can't share the truth with her. Coming out as Spider-Man's always on the tip of his tongue. But he can't. And there's a great quote, and I'm going to put it here on screen who said, coming out is letting people in. So that's what's going on here is he's hiding off a part of himself to the world and he's not letting other people in, even the people who love him. And that's what causes a lot of the trouble here. Sorry if I keep calling her MJ, I just really love the new movie, so just forgive me on that. Much like being Spider-Man, being queer and being in the closet is a very rough thing because you don't have the support system there and you have to hide. Really, every action you do is a chore to hide yourself. And that's not easy to do. Trust me, I've done it for a long time, and it's just not easy. And he gives a speech from his Uncle Ben. And this is the last time he'll see his Uncle Ben before he gets shot. With great power comes great responsibility. And that's the key we're going to be talking about all throughout this video. With great power comes great responsibility. When we come out, it is a very powerful moment. We live in a heteronormative and cisnormative society, so coming out really is a scary thing. There is great power in that, but there also is a lot of responsibility that comes with coming out that I think is really important to discuss. So Peter goes to a boxing match, so he wants to get some money to get a car. He wants to impress Mary Jane. He wants to be called the human spider, but the guy's like, no, you're Spider-Man. And what's true here is that a lot of the stuff we call ourselves are from other people. And while there are a certain degree of like, I want to have my own autonomy, it's about finding your place in the world. And eventually he does embrace the name. It's not a sign of conformity because being conformity would be not being Spider-Man, but he does what he needs to do and he's living within the societal constructs that exist. And yeah, I have to point out there's a homophobic joke here that Peter makes, which, okay, why? But wearing a costume and a mask can bring freedom. It's like for me, when I do drag, well, I'm not wearing a literal mask. I am, like, covering my face and going into a persona. And that's not true for all people, but for a lot of us, that can be really empowering to exaggerate a gender role that we don't typically portray, especially if you're trans. This can be a big deal. Living free like that is really powerful. Anyway, back to the movie. Peter is cut short and he says, "You owe me all this money," even though he wasn't in the ring that long. And the guy's there, it's like, "It's not my problem." And the robber runs off, and Peter had a chance to stop him, but he didn't. And when asked why didn't you do something, he says, don't know, that's my problem. Just saying the same thing back to the guy with all the money. Look, so he doesn't do anything, and he learns that this guy killed his Uncle Ben. And he tracks him down and he falls out a window. So here's the thing. He's not really guilty of anything. He didn't push this guy out the window. He fell out the window. So there's a difference there. And he's going to feel guilty either way because of what he did. Even though, in my opinion, there's a big difference between what this Spider-Man does and what Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man does. And I'll talk about that in the Amazing Spider-Man part of the video. But let's just say that I think at this point, his actions are more passive than active. Peter did not actively take a role in making sure his uncle's killer would be loose. Not that he would have been able to predict that. But what's important to know here is he didn't act, which is a passive action. It's still an action, but it's a passive action. And I think there's a bit of a distinction there I wanted to mention. Peter is welcomed into the Osborn family as if he's one their own, which can be a little bit dangerous in a queer allegory, and in a literal case, that he's not out to them as Spider-Man. At this point in the movie, he's not out to anyone as Spider-Man. But it's important to note here that communities can fall apart when you come out. I'm not saying that as a discouragement to coming out, but it is the fact that a lot of us, when we're thinking about coming out, we have to think really carefully about it. Because a lot of our relationships are going to change. And for some of us, you may not have a community. And that's one of the reasons found family is so important. It can be dangerous to come out. Even today, it is very dangerous to come out in some places and to some people. This is one of those cases that if they found out he was Spider-Man, that would have led to his death. And then some time passes and Peter misses Ben a lot. So the question I have here is, what would happen if Ben actually knew Peter was Spider-Man? Would this change anything? Ben could be a supportive figure, or he could think this is a little dangerous, because, like, he doesn't want him being in fights or anything, so, like, that makes sense. So, what does he think? And in the news, there's a lot of conflicted feelings about Spider-Man. Some people think he's a hero, some people think he's a menace. That narrative is very true for queer people as well. People are often put in the bubbles of you're either a hero or you're a threat to society. And that's not a good combination to be. When queer people exist in public life, there's often the same debate of, are you a hero or are you a threat to society? Now, granted, most people are somewhere in the middle. Most people are somewhere in the middle. They're not a threat to society, but they're also not a hero. But there are ways to take better action. And we'll be discussing that in further parts here. So just hang in there. And if you're still here now, give this video a like. J. Jonah Jameson of the Daily Bugle wants pictures of Spider-Man. This is a spectacle. For like a lot of cisgender heterosexual people, getting pictures of queer people is a spectacle. It's a spectacle of queerness. Then there's the question, is Spider-Man a hero or a menace to society? Even though Peter objects, he still goes along with it. So Norman Osborn trusts Peter, which, if only he knew. He has to stay in the closet because he knows his friend Harry would not be supportive of him. And at the Daily Bugle, there is this insistence on he must be framed as a menace. And do you trust him? And J. Jonah Jameson just says, I trust my barber. And the Green Goblin attacks J. Jonah Jameson and he says, I knew you were in this together. Okay, and now we get to the upside down kiss in the rain, which I don't know about any of you, but I've had that dream many times. I even had this dream before I knew I was trans. even had this dream before I knew I was attracted to men. It was just sort of one of those funny things of, huh, that was an interesting dream. I wonder why I had it. Why was I dressed like Mary Jane and kissing Spider-Man upside down in the rain? Seriously, I thought I was a straight guy and was having those dreams. Like, what? How did I not know I was queer? And Spider-Man evades the cops while trying to save people from a burning building. And all that. I don't know if you can hear it, but there's some cop cars running around. Just perfect timing. Anyway, then it's Thanksgiving, and much like the DMV, the doctor, or job interviews, the holidays are a hard time for queer people. So Peter gets caught by Norman that he's bleeding, and this has a queer parallel. You could get questions like, in my case, I was worried about getting caught. Did I shave my legs or paint my nails and stuff like that? Would I get caught? So it's on that same sort of line of, are there some clues that people are going to detect? So that's important to keep in mind as well. Allies, if you suspect someone in your life is queer, and they're not out yet, here's some advice you can remember. It's a simple phrase that has never been used to hurt queer people before. Don't ask, don't tell. Don't ask them if they're queer, and don't tell them that they're queer. Let them do this in their own time and in their own way. You can give clues that you're supportive, but just be a little bit careful of how you do it. And then Aunt May gets attacked. And this is something that's true, that when you come out as queer, your immediate circle, your family, your friends, even if they're supportive, or they don't even know, are in a harm's way. Just because there are people who do that. Like, for example, in Florida right now, there are laws that say a child who is trans and transitioning, their parents can be charged with child abuse and their child could be separated from them. That's the world we live in, where being queer is that dangerous. I'm going to talk about this later again in the video, but being queer is not a threat of violence. The violence comes from people who don't understand. So it's very clear Mary Jane has feelings for Spider-Man, and it's really hard for Peter to stay in the closet because he wants to be open and honest with her, but he can't. And in this movie, he's talking about himself in the third person. He's saying Spider-Man this, Spider-Man that, because he's afraid of even telling Mary Jane. And he has this interesting conversation with his aunt, and he asks, would it be so dangerous to tell Mary Jane? And she says, everyone knows. They're not talking about Spider-Man, they're talking about Peter's feelings for her. So, like, there's a parallel there that's pretty obvious and on the nose, but, you know, that's the point there. And then in the big finale, Goblin puts Peter in a literal trolley problem, where there are a bunch of kids in a trolley he could save, or he could save Mary Jane. So Peter solves this trolley problem by saving the kids and Mary Jane, and in a way telling all the philosophers, what are you doing? Come on. The funeral for Norman Osborn happens. So Norman Osborn died because he got impaled by his own glider. Harry blames Spider-Man even though he's oblivious that he's standing right next to Spider-Man and talking to him. And we end on the most powerful lines of the film. This is my gift, my curse. I am Spider-Man. And this is a powerful statement because it can sometimes be a curse to be queer in society because, well, we live in a homophobic and transphobic society. But being yourself and embracing who you are is one of the most powerful things you can do. I'm gonna rank this as A tier. Phenomenal film, but I know there are better coming up. So let me know, what do you think? Should this movie be an A tier film, or is it higher or lower? Tell me in the comments. So let's talk about Spider-Man 2. Peter Parker's not doing well at his job. He can't meet the 29-minute guarantee, which frankly is sort of illegal. That's why Domino's got rid of it, because people are getting in accidents all the time. And he's losing his position at the Bugle because his principal's overtaking the pictures. Does Peter want to contribute to the native impression of Spider-Man in society? Because remember, he's not just a role model to himself. He is a role model to other people who may have superhero abilities. Because he's not alone. He's so into Spider-Man that he forgets his own birthday and flunks out of university. His friend Harry asks, if you knew who Spider-Man was, would you tell me? That still shows not only that Peter still hasn't come out, but it's still a matter of safety because, well, it is dangerous to come out. And it's been 2 years since Uncle Ben was killed, and May's wondering what she would do without him. What a lot of queer people go through this. And given that we live in a homophobic society, love is not always seen as love, even though it is. Not to mention that Peter actually keeps his Spider-Man suit in the closet, which is sort of interesting when you really think about this as an analogy of coming out of the closet. And he decides that he's going to choose to wear his suit over being Spider-Man. He chooses to wear his suit, not his Spider-Man suit, which is a metaphor for how people protect themselves in a society where you can't be. He's literally keeping Spider-Man in the closet. In the end, he can't put Spider-Man away. Even the music around him keeps him in highlight. And he loses his powers. That there's the street performer singing about Spider-Man, and he's staying in the closet because he just can't take the pressure. He loses all his powers. And it really shows how complicated this can be. Because remember, coming out is not a simple step. It says, I wish I could tell you how I feel about you. And that's really hard to say. Because remember, coming out is not easy. That first time you come out, it's always on the tip of your tongue, but you can't say it. It should be simple, but it's not. You don't come out to everyone at once. Not like in the movies. You come out to people on an individual basis. Because remember, it's your relationships that evolve and change, either for better or for worse, when you come out. Octavius seems lost, because he sees himself as a monster. Then there's J. Jonah James' son, who he's very proud of because he's an astronaut. And then they make a Doctor Strange joke that Dr. Octavius should be named Doctor Strange, even though he already exists. Does this imply that Doctor Strange exists within this universe, which would be really interesting? But they never go around to showing that. And then they go to the bank, and Jeff Winger from Community's there. If you want me to do a video of the Community, let me know in the comments. He's being a jerk to Aunt May, and apparently this bank runs on gold coins. Although Aunt May is just a badass in this scene, and Peter's having these really distressing dreams about being Spider-Man and all that, and he goes to a doctor. And he knows about HIPAA, right? Like, if he tells the doctor I'm Spider-Man, the doctor can't tell anyone, right? Peter can't tell the doctor that he's Spider-Man, even though the doctor's already figured that out, and, he has to be confidential. But the doctor's really kind and has this really supportive pep talk, and explains that this is a lack of uncertainty in your life, and that's what's going on. It's not physical, it's mental. Which, mental health should be treated just as importantly as physical health, because it is. You need to have good physical and mental health. And I know that's a variable statement, but and everyone's at a different point in that, but it's important to work through that. And Peter ultimately is depressed. He's given up on being Spider-Man and helping people. Then there's this moment where the violinist is like, where have you gone, Spider-Man? To show that there are people who miss seeing him around. For all the stuff about Spider-Man being vigilante and being a danger to society that they always talk about, it's important to reference here that a lot of people really do like Spider-Man. And that's important to keep in mind, because just because it seems like no one likes queer people, there are plenty of people who do. There are plenty of people who will love and respect queer people. It's just a matter of finding them. And then, finally, he decides to suit up. And it's a symbolic change for him to help others. And the violin lady helps show this off to him. The violin lady helps show this off to him and his role in society. And he turns away from a fight. And he shows, I'm responsible. Peter has this conversation with his Aunt May, and he talks about the night Uncle Ben was killed and how he's responsible. Now, Aunt May is upset. She leaves the room. He talks about how he tried to tell her that there were so many times I wanted to tell you but couldn't. Now, she was upset and eventually forgave him. That was the issue there, that he didn't think he could come out to his Aunt May. He didn't come out as Spider-Man, just the fact that he was there with Uncle Ben when he died. It's not really his fault. She assures him that Uncle Ben was proud of him for everything he'd done. And that finally puts Peter in a place where he can finally step up and be Spider-Man again. It's important to remember that people die when he didn't step up. It's a lot of pressure. This is the great responsibility of coming out. You are a role model to people, even if you're not famous. You are making a difference on the small scale. When you come out, there are people who are around you who are queer and in the closet, and you demonstrate that you're a safe person to come to. And that can make all the difference in the world. to know that they're not alone. And I know that's a lot of pressure to put on someone, and I'm not saying that you all have to be an advocate 100% of the time, but it is a very important time to be an advocate. For all the hate Spider-Man gets, it makes him a better hero in the end. And it's not about being a hero. Even J. Jonah Jameson knows that he eventually drove him away with his commentary. But that flips on a dime the moment he takes the suit. Now, the train scene. I think this has to be my favorite scene out of any Spider-Man movie of all time, if not my favorite superhero or action film scene of all time. Where his suit's all beat up after trying to help these people and holding back the train, and they bring him in. They carry him in, and his mask is off, and one of them says, "He's just a kid, not older than my son." That's the power of coming out. When you come out, you show people how normal it is to be queer. You set a big example, and the people on the train even help him conceal his identity, which, honestly, it's a very beautiful, beautiful scene. When Harry finds out, it's this huge betrayal, but just remember, there are still allies in this world, whether you know them or not. They're there. Octavius just can't bring himself to destroy his own work. In the end, Mary Jane learns the truth about Peter Parker when he saves her. And Harry finds all the Green Goblin stuff, learning about his father. Mary Jane bails on her own wedding, which is a little weird to the other guy, but it's her choice, and she's free to do that. So that's Spider-Man 2. And honestly, it's such a beautiful film, especially with that train scene. So I'm gonna give this film S tier. The first S tier Spider-Man film, so well done. So let's talk about Spider-Man 3. So Spider-Man 3, at the time it came out, did not have good reception. But has it changed? Let's talk about that. So Spider-Man's pretty popular in New York. Peter's going to shows, seeing Mary Jane perform and all that. Really beautiful stuff, right? But Harry's still mad at Peter due to his father's death, because he found out in the last movie Harry's dropping off bigger flowers for Mary Jane, which is not very good. But yeah, Peter's somewhat out of the closet. And this has changed his relationships, obviously. So Mary Jane is supportive, and they're getting closer and closer as a result. But Harry's very resentful and angry, especially for Peter not saying anything earlier. And, the fact that his father was killed by him, supposedly. Flint, who just shows up, and he's wearing this orange jumpsuit, who he later becomes Sandman because he sneaks into a military experiment, which they didn't plan for. Honestly, it's really weird. He's an escaped convict and everything. Peter wants to ask Aunt May to get the ring so he can propose to Mary Jane. Harry tries to kill Peter, but Harry wouldn't listen to Peter's reasonings for what happened. And in the process, Peter loses the ring. Peter tries to give Harry CPR, but it doesn't work. And in the end, Harry loses his memories. He does remember the death of his father, and he was told he was gone for a really long time. And something happens with the Sandman guy, science experiment, whatnot. And Mary Jane's show is not getting good reviews, and she's eventually cut from the show. There's a scene where where a crane's going out of control, and he rescues Mary Jane, and then there's an awkward conversation, which is like, "By the way, I'm dating your daughter." In the Daily Bugle, J. Jonah Jameson is under stress management and trying to be hip with people, but he still sees Spider-Man as a criminal, which is still a problem. Because when you're trying to deal with the youth, deal with them as intelligent people, right? And don't talk down to them. Then we get Stan Lee cameo, and this is such a beautiful cameo, and he says, "One person can make a difference." And that's important when talking about coming out, because, really, one person can make a difference. If you can be there for one person when they come out, if you can be there, you can make a difference. You may be one person, but you are making a big difference. It doesn't matter if you have a big influence. It doesn't matter if you're a celebrity, have a big influence or anything like that, or a regular person, or being a role model for people who are coming out can make all the difference in the world. One person can make a difference. And Harry has greater reflexes, and he's more comfortable around Peter now that he doesn't remember it. And then Mary Jane gets replaced. Peter Parker's kind of a bad photographer, and then this guy Eddie to take his place. And Flint gets busted again because he broke out of prison. Mary Jane has reasons Peter isn't there to, like, explain why Spider-Man's there. And then there's a public celebration of Spider-Man, despite the fact that he's technically considered a criminal by law. That's a whole nother point because, queer people were often criminalized, but there is still a celebration there because it is hard being queer. That's why we have pride and everything. And they recreate the upside down kiss, which is, how do they know about that? I don't know. And why is Peter doing this? Oh, because he interacted with some alien material. And he starts kissing Gwen Stacy, his lab partner, who he didn't even mention to Mary Jane. And Mary Jane walks out, because obviously she's very upset about this. If Peter wants to keep his identity private, why is he taking his mask off in public? I don't get it. And he really is an icon. He even sees himself as an icon, which is not a very good thing to do, because he's developing quite the ego. And then there's an altercation with the Sandman, Flint. Turns out Flint is actually the one responsible for Uncle Ben's death. It's not the guy he thought he was. So, I don't know. Due to the fact that Peter is under the symbiote of Venom, he wants revenge now. Should not be what's going on. Spider-Man should not be killing people, and Aunt May points that out. It's not up to us to determine who lives or dies. So Mary Jane goes to see Harry, and then Harry remembers, oh yeah, Peter Parker's Spider-Man and all that. And he may have probably killed my father. And Harry even attacks Mary Jane. And Mary Jane sets a trap for Peter to break up with him. And he's seeing someone else, another guy. Peter isn't his normal mellow self now around Mary Jane. And at the Daily Bugle, it comes out that Eddie was faking pictures of Spider-Man, so it's like full-fledged retraction and everything, which they actually have journalistic integrity at this place, which isn't going to be true at other universes, but we'll get to that when we get to it. And then there's that infamous scene where Peter's dancing and all that, and he's being kind of sexist and objectifying women by pointing at them. And before you ask, no, I'm not going to be doing the dance in this video. And Sandman comes back, and then Harry's going out with Gwen Stacy. It's like, Peter's playing the piano. Peter hits Mary Jane, which is like full-fledged, what's wrong with you? And she says, who are you? Something is wrong here. And oftentimes when men get depressed, they do get into these angry attitudes. It's not always the case, and it shouldn't be encouraged and dismissed like that. But this is often what happens, and depression can happen from just being oppressed and hiding yourself in society, like Peter is. And then there's an attempt to kill Peter Parker in a church with an old reporter. Peter can't take his suit off at this point, and this leads to masculinity issues. May comes to visit him, and he's upset. He stopped talking about Mary Jane. I'm not ready. You're a good person, all that sort of stuff. And the question that comes up is, how do I feel now about the Sandman subplot? Like, with all the hindsight this movie has, like, yes, it's a very packed film with a lot of characters, but it is also a very long film. It's about 2.5 hours long. So, and this may become out of a controversial statement, but like, I think they actually blended pretty well. So, I think Spider-Man 3 gets a whole lot of bad rep. Is it as good as the other two films in this series? No, it's not. And I'm just going to say right now, even though I still have more to talk about, this is easily a B-tier film. It's not bad, but it's pretty good. It's not great, pretty good. Now Venom is teaming up with Spider-Man and everything. Then there's a crisis situation. Spider-Man thwarts off the police there. And then Mary Jane Watson is identified on the police as being one of the victims. And he pulls out the red suit, not the black one, and asking Harry for help in the end. And there's a question of, does he deserve the help or not? Mary Jane needs their help. So Peter's trying to convince Harry that they need to step up and help her. And he's like, I don't know if I want to do that. But he ends up doing it, and it's something there. Remember, this is not about deserving needs help or not. One of the things that has come up with trans people in particular is when to respect people's pronouns. There's this debate online as to, not amongst the trans community, but along other communities of, do trans people deserve to have their pronouns respected? Is this about behavior? There are people in the trans community who do bad things, like any people in any population. So, but that's important to keep in mind there. And then there's the discussion of, do we respect trans people's pronouns afterwards? Yes, you respect their pronouns. Pronouns are not a privilege. I was seeing this video on YouTube Shorts with Caitlyn Jenner, and in the comments section there were people saying, I'm going to gender her correctly because I agree with her point. Being gendered correctly is not a privilege. It is a right. And if you take anything away from that, it's if you're a parent and you have a trans kid, love them and respect them. Frankly, I have mixed feelings about punishments anyway, but like, do not take away their gender-affirming activities or anything like that. Do not misgender them. Taking away their gender is not a punishment. It's a right. It's a way to live. And then there's the shot of Peter with the American flag, which is supposed to be this American image and all that. Mary Jane's throwing cinder blocks and everything. And the news talks about how this is a tragedy and the end for Spider-Man. Harry saves the day. Because remember, even if you have done bad things and have a bad past, you can still make a difference. It just takes a little bit of an effort to do so. But Harry dies in the end. What they realized through all this is that when Ben died, he was just trying to help the guy who was robbing him. He's trying to teach him, like, hey, this is not the right path. Ben was trying to be a good guy. And the quote, we choose to do what's right. Because, well, that's what we do. So yeah, that's Spider-Man 3. I think it's highly underrated. Is it a fantastic film? No. But it is a really good film. So let's see what the next film is. Oh god, no. Oh god, no. Fuck. Alright, so we're gonna talk about Amazing Spider-Man. And to be clear, I don't have any ill wishes against Andrew Garfield. He's a great actor and everything. It's more of the writing I have props with. So in this film, we actually get to see Peter and his parents get dropped off and everything. And why do we have 30-year-old teenagers in this film? I'm not saying you should get actual teenagers to play them, but like at least try to find some 18 to 20-year-old actors, because god, these are like 30-year-old actors playing teenagers. It's really distracting. Peter gets into a fight with Flash again because, you know, you can't have anything original in this movie. And that, of course, gets Gwen Stacy concerned and everything. Ben knows about the fight, but looks the other way about it on this time. Which I think says a lot about men and violence in society. If you're a man watching at this point in the video, like, take this as notes of how to do better in society and help other men. I don't want to be the one lecturing you all, but like, come on, there's some work that needs to get done there. And if you can't see that, that's a problem. And Peter finds a picture of his father working with someone named Kirk Connors, who he goes to find to work with. And there's a trend going on here, which is that Aunt May is getting younger and younger in these films. Peter goes to the subway, and he's in the lab after sticking to the ceiling. Peter sticks to a woman on the subway after he gives her the shoulder touch, which I think that's in another movie, but we'll get to that when we get to that. Being queer in public can be dangerous, and that's important to remember, that, like, being outwardly queer can be dangerous. So, like, for a lot of us, we need to be careful. So, just so we don't get killed or attacked. One of the hard things about being queer, Ben talks about not being humiliated, he talks about getting even and all that. Like, this film has some issues with masculinity that, like, seriously, men, don't use this as an example of what is healthy masculinity. The other Spider-Man are much better examples of what healthy masculinity looks like. And unlike the last Spider-Man, this Spider-Man is actually doing something better. Like, he's practicing in a warehouse without people, which is a safer thing to do in this case. Like, although he forgot about his aunt and has to apologize to her, which makes sense and all that, but like, this is a lot of responsibility to be putting on a teenager. And Ben says this line, do good things for good people. I think he botched the line there. So Peter goes out and the store gets robbed, but Peter went along with it, which, when compared to the first Spider-Man movie, this is not okay. Like, he went along with it, like, which is different than what the other Spider-Man was doing. In the first Spider-Man movie, Peter was not a direct contributor to the problem, but he was still an inactive participant in it. Like, this time, Peter is just a full active participant in the robbery, so like, I don't really see it. And he's even saying, not my policy to protect you after the whole Penny situation, like, come on. And Ben gets into a literal gunfight in this case, like, he didn't even have a knife to this gunfight. In the last film, he was like, trying to convince the guy to be the right thing. No, he's just trying to be an unarmed hero in this case, like, and of course he dies. And Peter's reacting very violently to Flash now for, like, just talking to him. Like, I get it, like, there's some history there, but still, like, pretty close to toxic masculinity, if not already there. And honestly, this school's a little weird. Like, they have 30-year-old high schoolers running around, and they're getting into fights and violating dress code. Like, seriously, there's no administration at this school. Peter decides to get revenge by trying to beat up the guy who killed Ben. This is not healthy. They're like, I've just seen your face. I just can't forget this time or place where we just met. Despite what the transphobes may say, I am not a man. Really, I should not be the one talking to you about masculinity and healthy masculinity, but like, I think it's pretty clear that like, violence is bad. And I'm not gonna be the one lecturing men about how to manage their emotions, but just don't be violent. Don't objectify women. Those are like the big ones there. Like, what else you do that's sort of like what men need to work on themselves? I'm not the one to do that, okay? So there's a criminal and Peter wraps him up in his web, and it's an Eighth Amendment violation, like clearly kidnapping. Probably one of my biggest problems with this film is I don't buy it. I don't buy why Peter would be so invested in fighting. Like, it starts out from this place of revenge, and it's like, it seems sort of morally bankrupt to do so. Previous Spider-Man was inactive at dealing with who he thought the killer was. But here, no, 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 no. He has to be an active role in it. And it's more about getting revenge in this case. And this Peter, at least in this film, doesn't seem inherently good to me. And I don't get it. Like, he's going out of this from revenge. Revenge does not lead to you being a hero. So, like, I don't really get it. So Peter gets invited over to Gwen Stacy's parents, and dinner is awkward, like it is for many queer people. Honestly, there's a bit of a surprise there of, like, being surprised that they don't like Spider-Man and all that. Like, Peter starts arguing with a cop. That has to be, like, one of the most white privileged thing I've ever seen. Like, seriously. To the rooftop with Gwen Stacy, and he finally comes out. Which is a new thing for this series. Like a willing coming out participant, like. And he uses his webs to reel her in and everything. Honestly, it's kind of a sweet scene, but does it really account for the rest of the movie? I don't know. And for some reason, it's on a rooftop. Because, you know, that's a great place to come out. There's also a literal warrant out for Spider-Man's arrest. And then the discussion of, it's not your job to be the police here. And then he says, maybe it is. And then Gwen Stacy's father's like, you're not alone and all that, which is great propaganda, if you must ask. Like, and if only the press blame the right person, but you know, much like the real world, they blame the queer person in the end. Peter goes to Gwen's father's funeral, who died in the fight, and they close off with Uncle Ben's message about greatness and stuff. So yeah, I'm not a fan of this movie. Bottom the tier. Bottom. Period. It's at the very bottom. Sorry. It's not about Andrew Garfield, it's just that I don't like this movie. I'll have more positive things to say about him in the future, but this is not that film. So let's talk about The Amazing Spider-Man 2. So we open up with learning more about Peter's father. So we learn that Peter's father and his choice to leave. And he does something with a file on a plane or something, and it crashes. Peter's living his life as Spider-Man, and he accidentally runs into someone, helps him with his blueprints, and even gives him a good pep talk in the way. His name's Max. And they go to his graduation because apparently these 30-year-olds have just graduated high school. Gwen Stacy's valedictorian, so she gets to speak, and they've only been here for 4 years. What, like, were you held back in middle school 12 years? Like, what the hell? And at the ceremony, Gwen Stacy talks about following your path, follow your own trail. So May tells Peter to get a better job, and Peter blames the fact that minimum wage hasn't kept up with inflation since the 60s, but could have had a real good living on minimum wage at that time. And technically he's true about that, so it's like, that's a pretty good point, Peter. Socialism. Peter's eating with Gwen's family, but they promise to keep away, even though he promised as Spider-Man to keep away from her. And honestly, he's just having trouble staying in the closet. And in the end, Gwen breaks up with Peter because they're having such internal conflicts about this. And she knows he needs to balance time with her as well and not be Spider-Man full-time. And then there's this big national debate about vigilantism because, you know, like queer people, our lives are subject to national debate, and our very existence is subject to debate. But there is this good point there about property damage versus, like, keeping people safe and all that, which is an interesting debate to have. And then there's the scene with Spider-Man buying cold meds. It's like, okay, are you even capable of having a cold? Like, I don't know. As someone who knows Spider-Man lore better than I do, please let me know down in the comments what you think about that. Peter's hiding under his sheets, like, so Aunt May can't see his outfit, which is, like, a very queer thing to do. Like, how many of us haven't done that before? Like, we see inside Max's closet. That Max is the guy who Peter saved, and he had the blueprints and everything. And he has posters and cutouts of Spider-Man. Okay, so this guy clearly has a crush on Spider-Man, which is like, I mean, who of us have not had the dream? But like, in the film, like, it's pretty laid out that like, this guy has a crush on him, and he genuinely thinks of himself as a friend of Spider-Man and all that, because he did say he was friends, all that sort of stuff. But there is this element of there's a clear crush there. Okay, and then Pierre turns the laundry red and blue because he claims he washed the American flag even though he washed the suit. Honestly, when you're queer, you get pretty good at coming up with excuses. For some reason, he hasn't. I don't understand that. Then Ryan's from The Office is there, and he's this big jerk to Max, saying "Oh, I'm Spider-Man," all this, blah. And Max wants to attack him, but he doesn't. But Gwen remembers who he is in the elevator, which is this sort of sweet moment. Max has to stay behind at work on his birthday, even though he already made plans. Then there's a workplace accident. Capitalism, isn't it great? And he gets electrocuted but doesn't die. Then there's the whole big scene in Times Square with Electro. Peter drops everything to help, but since it's New York, no one's really paying attention. The thing about Max is, since he's a black man, he's treated that way by the police. I'm not making a joke here. I don't joke about topics like that. I'm just stating the fact that, I'm just stating the fact that a black man gets heavily antagonized by the police in this film as well. So, there's the real world parallel right there. And he has hurt feelings about being hurt, which makes some sense. Spider-Man tries to be compassionate, unlike the police, who just want to shoot the guy. And Spider-Man just wants to take him away from the situation and go from there. But it's an accidental attack. It was not deliberate. Spider-Man tried to do the right thing, but he couldn't. Harry sees Norman Osborn in the hospital. He's in bad condition, so he tries to get the help there. Because there's a genetic condition where he needs Spider-Man's blood and all that. And eventually, his father dies. But people on the news have all these theories and misleading ideas about what Spider-Man's intentions were, but they weren't. Much like how queer people, our intentions are kind of skewed by the media. Just saying. Electro wants revenge from Spider-Man. And then there's this whole story about Peter wanting the truth from his father and all that, and feeling unappreciated, especially from Ben, although it's sort of long and convoluted there. Turns out his father was not a traitor to society, he was just didn't want to build those weapons, so I get it. Everyone has a part of themselves they hide, which is a very clear way of saying I'm a safe person to come to if you want to talk about being Spider-Man. Oscorp is sort of pronounced dead at this point. And then Harry Osborn becomes a new young CEO, and he's just as ruthless as a capitalist as his father was. And then Peter comes by checking on Harry. Harry says, "I want to see Spider-Man, he can help me." Peter says, "Are you sure Spider-Man's not a woman?" And that is such an egg remark right there. And for those who don't know, an egg is a trans person who hasn't come into their own identity yet. Seriously, I've said stuff like that before I realized I was trans. Come on. Although, if he changed his name, would he call himself Spider-Woman? Although that's kind of already taken. Spider-Girl, already taken. So who knows? Spider-Man finally meets with Harry and says, "Look, you can't take my blood. I don't know what it's going to do. It could be dangerous, all that sort of stuff." And really, just the choice is is this a chance to hurt other people? And now that he doesn't have Peter's blood, he's going to die a horrible death like his father. And Harry gets arrested and locked out of the system because, hiding the death of an employee is kind of a bad move. Which, on a side note, this movie has a lot more accountability than our own real world. Harry tries to make a deal with Electro, which is basically what Trump did in 2016. Have you been screwed over by a rich man? Why not let a rich man save you? And Gwen Stacy gets this Oxford Fellowship scholarship. It's really big for her. She worked really hard for it and everything. In the end, Gwen Stacy tells Peter she's leaving because she has her own life and wants to go to Oxford. So, but Electro fights back and doesn't fall for it. Gwen gets into Oxford, which is exciting, and Peter says, "Why don't I move to England too? They have crime there." And then Spider-Man's working with the cops to get change done, which is also part of Gwen's idea, but she insists on coming as well, which is we all know what's happening. Up to this point, the film's doing really well compared to the other one, but let's keep talking. And this is a segment I like to call Sally Goes on an Angry Rant. Peter teasing Electro while they're fighting. This is not the same Peter we just saw earlier in this film. teasing of Electro. Like, come on. You're supposed to be empathetic to this guy. Teasing him is not the right thing to do here. Honestly, I think Spider-Man should have just been like, I'm sorry. Sorry I neglected you. It was my fault. The system is wrong for screwing you over. I mean, this film already makes so many anti-capitalist films. I don't know why they didn't go for it, other than maybe capitalism. Because, people really love capitalism for some reason. Frankly, I really love empathetic Spider-Mans, and this film sort of didn't do that for me. Because it's like, when you start teasing the villain who had admiration for you and became a villain because you weren't being compassionate to him, really just grinds my gears a bit. Like, not to mention Gwen chose to be out there as well. She tries to save the day. Harry attacks, but then she dies. Peter remembers her speech from earlier with the graduation. It says, where she said, who we are and who we're meant to be. Because, well, that's what coming out's about. That you're about who you are and what you're supposed to be. And there are barriers in place in society, like how Electro was shut out of everything and just treated terribly. Like, there is a real reason that these barriers hold people back from coming out. So how do I rate this film? If it wasn't for Spider-Man teasing Electro and the needless death of Gwen Stacy, I would have said this film would have at least gotten a B tier, right up there with Spider-Man 3. But I can't do that anymore. It goes right to the bottom, right with Amazing Spider-Man. I guess it's a little bit better than Amazing Spider-Man, but this ending really sort of f***ed that up. So let's talk about Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. So we start off with this movie with a completely different hero. We have Miles Morales. In his world, there is a Spider-Man named Peter Parker. So in the previous films we saw, Peter Parker wasn't doing well in school, and Miles Morales is in a similar situation in this film. He feels alienated and like he doesn't belong. He got sent over to a private school, and he feels out of place, like it's elitist and stuff like that. And to add insult to injury, his father is a cop, so. However, he relates more to his uncle, and you can actually see the shoulder touch in The Amazing Spider-Man. Just pointing that out. So again, in this iteration, Miles, like Peter, had some discomfort with his puberty and not being able to explain what's going on. And he even finds, throughout his trouble where he's sticking to a bunch of different stuff, he finds a Spider-Man comic based on Peter Parker, and he says, what's going on? All this sort of stuff. So the exact same thing is happening, which is a little bit convenient, but this is a movie, so it's fun. So without getting into the MCU yet, we can actually see what it's like to be in a world where there are already heroes. So in this world, Peter Parker exists and he's Spider-Man. And he's a cultural figure. Like, there's music about him, there's all this merchandise about him. So for example, there's the custodian at Miles' school, and he likes to listen to Spider-Man Christmas carols. Spider-Man Christmas carols, because he says Spider-Man's confident. One of the ways this is true for a queer analogy is to think about is a lot of times us as queer people, after we come out, we have a surge of confidence. That's because we're being true to who we are. We don't have to hide. So that can bring out our confidence in many ways. And not only that, being confident, if you're able to project that, is a good way of being a good role model to show other people that life gets better and things can change. Now, in some cases, I admit that could be a bit of wishful thinking, but it is a good idea to point out that things can get better, and they often will, under the right circumstances, because pessimism keeps people in the closet. Yes, pessimism is sometimes warranted. That's the problem. And when Miles is hanging out with his uncle, he gets bitten by a spider. And throughout all this, he's embarrassed to talk to his own father, which makes sense, because his father is very outspoken against Spider-Man. The Peter Parker Spider-Man. And this is the reason why this section is about allies and trust in allies. Because it's made clear throughout the film that the reason Miles doesn't come out to his father is not that he feel like his father would be unsafe. It's that his father keeps talking about Spider-Man in such a derogatory way. He fears that he would not be given the same level of acceptance because his father calls Spider-Man a menace and all this. If you're an ally and want to set a good example, it's a good idea to speak generally positive about queer people, because it shows that you can be supportive. You don't have to support all queer people, but queer people in general, if you can do that and speak positively and openly about it, that is a way you can show that you support those around you, even if they're not out of the closet yet. Miles develops his powers and he meets Peter Parker, and they both find contentment in the idea that they're not alone, because finding community is really important. And if this sounds appealing to you and you want to learn a lot more about this, I have a video where I talk about Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban and finding community. So if you'd like to see that, click the link somewhere after this video. While trying to fight some bad guys and stuff like that, and there's this flash drive essentially, and the worlds are colliding now due to this machine. Peter, using his spy sense, tells Miles to hide because he can lose his family and everyone he loves. And this is a very serious thing, obviously. And as I mentioned earlier, trans people can be taken away from their families in some places. It is dangerous. There is benefit there. For example, those who transition actually have a 72% reduction in suicidality. Let's be honest. All these bills that limit medical and social transition, especially of kids, are plain evil. We should not be calling them an anti-groomer bill. We should call them what they are, a death to children bill, because that's what they are. Children are going to die because of these bills. So call them what they are. These aren't anti-grooming bills, because this isn't about grooming. It's about children and protecting children. And all the people commenting that transitioning is a permanent medical decision. Do you know what else is a permanent decision? Suicide. So, either you're too dumb to understand that, or you're too evil to care. I just had to get that out of the way because this is important to discuss, and it really does show being queer can be dangerous in this society. You can not only be beat up and assaulted, but the government can take action against you in some places. We are under attack, so we need to make sure that we're fighting for our rights. As a legal disclaimer here, I cannot condone violence. However, I do encourage non-violent protests and those sorts of actions that are non-violent. And frankly, anyone who would support these bills, you're a monster. You're the villain of the story. You're not protecting kids. You're making sure kids die. Peter Parker tries to stop the worlds from colliding, but he ends up dying in the process. And even after all that, Miles' father is still not supportive. This is a clear picture as to why Miles' father is not supportive and why Miles wouldn't want to come out to him. There's this big sense of mourning, and people are making money off of it, which, in the end, nothing really changes as a result because of that. And then there's the line, "We are counting on you." And Miles says, "They're counting on me." And someone says, and the crowd says, "Not you specifically." But the problem with a statement like, "not you specifically," is it allows everyone to stand back and let things move forward. Because we act as individuals, we don't act as a collective. And while not everyone can be an advocate and do the right thing, we can all do something. Nothing will change if nobody steps up. As an example, Harvey Milk was elected the first openly gay mayor of San Francisco. And one of the big points he pushed on and on again was the idea that coming out has power. It is a political statement. And the more people who come out, the safer it is for everyone. The reason for that is people are less likely to say, "I hate gay people," if they know a gay person. You're more likely to hate someone if you don't know them. So, if more people, let's say, come out as gay, more people will say, "I know a gay person, and I love them." It makes it hard for people to say, "I hate gay people," when there's so many around them who they love and care for. Then there's another Spider-Man who transfers over from another dimension, And in his case, he's going through a lot of depression, and being a hero is hard and lonely, so he has a lot of challenges he's going through. But he agrees to help Miles through his process and become a better Spider-Man. Peter has a good understanding of these villains because he's fought them before and he knows what he's doing. And not only that, Gwen Stacy hiding in plain sight, because remember, queer people exist everywhere. We're queer and we're everywhere. Everywhere. So yeah, we're everywhere. Like, just because you don't know that we're queer doesn't mean we're not queer. We're queer. Remember, coming out is also not a single act. It is a journey. Not everyone deserves to hear you come out. Being a good ally requires trust. Queer people tend to be our biggest allies because they've known what we've gone through. If you are queer, I am your ally because I am also queer and I know what it's like to go through. That, and I also have empathy, so. And it turns out Aunt May in this universe is actually supportive, so that's very fun and a good detail to include here, because as I've been pointing out in previous iterations, Spider-Man, as I've been pointing out, each iteration of Spider-Man is becoming more and more open about who they are to those around them. Because remember, Peter Parker in the original Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire wouldn't even tell his Aunt May, wouldn't tell Mary Jane. But in the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, he tells Gwen Stacy. And in this iteration, we know that this Peter was out to his Aunt May. So, what can that say about and when we get to the MCU, you'll see that this goes even further. And then Uncle Aaron dies. His uncle dies, who turns out to be a villain. And it's important to remember here that even if your actions are not public, like people don't know what you're doing, you're still hurting other people. You can hide behind a username all you want, but you can still hurt people. Because remember, we're people as well, and you can't do that to us. You gotta treat us like human beings. So, of course, Miles' father, when he sees his own brother lying dead, he immediately blames Spider-Man without thinking of it. Miles' father tries to connect with him after he learns about the death of his brother, but it's just a little too late here, because he's already said so much about Spider-Man that it's just too late for him to connect. Oh, and there were a bunch of other Spider-Mans in the other dimensions, and they all had the same thing to say to Miles. You're not ready, you need to work on this. And in the end, he decided, you know what, I'm gonna do this. He took the leap of faith and did what he needed to do. And in the end, he did come out. But it was a leap of faith, which can be dangerous. But it's sometimes all you can do. And in the end, the father somewhat comes around, where he says, I don't agree with Spider-Man's methods, but he is a hero. So, that is some progress, but there's still a long way to go. And of course, for this movie, I have to put it in S tier, because it is just incredible. So let's talk about Captain America Civil War. So, this is the first film featuring Spider-Man in the MCU, at least canonically. There's still some debate about Iron Man 2. But what's important to note here is, while Spider-Man does not have a significant portion of the runtime, there are still important things to discuss here, not just directly related to Spider-Man, but to this idea of coming out as a whole. Similar to the universe with Miles Morales and Into the Spider-Verse, this Peter Parker, at least, is not alone. There are more superheroes than him. So in the Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire films, Peter Parker is pretty much the only superhero he's aware of that exists in his world. However, in the MCU, there are plenty of other heroes like Captain America and Iron Man in this established universe who already have established storylines and an established legacy in universe. That's important to bring up when talking about this new Spider-Man played by Tom Holland. And the reason for that is we're coming in from a different perspective here. Whereas Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield had to be trailblazers in their own time and in their own universe, in the MCU, this Peter Parker does not have to start from zero. There are already heroes in this world who are established and have legacies and fans community, and all that sort of stuff. So the big theme about this movie is about superhero accountability and scrutiny. But there's this whole big discussion about who's going to fight when they need to fight. Is there an indifference to fighting? Or are people going to fight by their own will or being told to do so by the government? The Avengers have had many failures, and this is brought up when the Sokovia Accords are being drafted. And there is, I guess, some parallel here to bring up. So as an example, Blair White and Caitlyn Jenner are both queer people, but they are not good role models for the community. Both of them continually undermine what we need to move forward with our rights in society, continue sending bad messages to society. They are not good examples of what a queer advocate does. This is what I'm talking about. With great power comes great responsibility. This is the responsibility that comes with coming out. Once you come out, you have a responsibility to be good to your community. Not just the people in your local community, but to the queer community as well. If you are not good to the queer community, you undermine our points and make our values seem hollow to those who are not a part of it. This is why the Avengers are in danger of losing it all. The reason is they've had so many failures that they've lost public confidence. Sokovia Accords are this agreement that the government set up that you have to sign it in order to be a hero, and you do it on their request. It's not optional to sign, it's just going to be the law, so you just have to follow it. And you either basically sign the document, or you agree, or you're implicitly agreeing to retire from being a superhero. And this may sound like it's based on actions, but it goes deeper than that when you think a little bit deeper about the history going on here. Because what is an action versus what is a people? The actions of an individual and the actions of a culture cannot be separated. That's very important to say right there. You cannot separate a culture from activities or their behavior. You cannot do that. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, let me use an example. Celebrating Hanukkah is an example of an activity, but it is something Jewish people do. It is a Jewish cultural activity, the celebration of Hanukkah. If there were a law to say no one can celebrate Hanukkah, that would be anti-Semitic. So, that's like saying being gay is legal, but you can't have a gay partner, you can't get married, you can't have sex, stuff like that. That is a regular part of culture and of life that aren't hurting anyone. What Sokovia Accords essentially are is a registry for superpowered individuals. Because what counts as an action to be a superhero? Do you need to save someone from a bridge? Save someone from a burning building? What is it? I mean, if let's say Magneto were in this universe, and he wasn't using his powers for villainy or even heroism, and he was just like a metal worker, would that be considered acting as an enhanced individual in some way? In essence, the Sokovia Accords are a registry, like what they had in Nazi Germany. And beware, if someone tells you, let's create a database of gay people, trans people, bi people, anything like that, they are going down the same path as the Nazis did in Nazi Germany. And by the way, they actually had a registry for gay and trans people at the time. It wasn't just Jewish people. And then there's a point here Vision brings up. And it's important to discuss here in its proper context because there have been some recent events that need to be addressed here. There was a shooting in Colorado. The shooting was at an LGBT club. And in response, self-declared fascist and transphobe Matt Walsh decided to make his opinion known.
According to the left, the drag queen child combination has become dangerous. They say it's a lightning rod for violent backlash. Right? That's what they said. And it's greatly exaggerated, of course. Mostly it's invented out of whole cloth, actually. But even by their version of events, if it's causing this much chaos and violence, why do you insist on continuing to do it? If according to you, it's like putting people's lives at risk, if the effort to have men cross-dress in front of children is putting people's lives at risk, why are you still doing it? Is it that important to you?
And for those of you who don't get what he's saying, stop being queer because we're going to hurt you. Is that what Vision was saying was that by being superpowered individuals, they inherently invite challenge to them. It's not the other way around. They don't bring the violence comes to them because of who they are. And that's what it's like to be queer as well. That we're not the ones starting the violence. It's people who don't like us who are starting the violence and retaliating. So when Matt Walsh was talking about how queer people should not be living their life, essentially going back to the closet, what he's saying is these attacks are going to happen because of who you are, and it's not the problem that you're being attacked, it's the problem it's because of you. And Steve Rogers, Captain America, brings up a good point of even the UN is subject to scrutiny. No governing body is perfect. And that's true, because where do our rights come from? Yes, they technically come from the government. But we also have rights that are just innate to us. We have rights given to us by society. Not necessarily the law, but by society. That we should all have the opportunity to have a rich, fulfilling life, and should not be attacked for who we are. And we should be able to live without being attacked. All that sort of stuff. Do all these things actually happen in real life? No. But those are rights nonetheless. Natasha, Black Widow, talks about getting trust. That they need public trust back, so maybe they should sign it. However, remember, who is accountable for this? Is it them? The government? What do they have to say about the Avengers? So, what does the government have to say about queer people? Do we deserve a right to live? Do we deserve a right to be ourselves? Do we deserve an equal place in society? And that was also what the gay marriage decision was about back in 2015. Obergefell v. Hodges, which determined that you could marry someone of the same gender as you. It said that you cannot discriminate on basis of gender or sex when it comes to marriage licenses. And one of the reasons for that is when you tell people who are in a same gender relationship that they can't get married, you are saying that their relationship is inferior to others. You are limiting what they are able to do. That's why it's a right. At least I really hope it's still a right. And then there's the funeral of Peggy Carter. So Peggy Carter was fought alongside Steve Rogers. And they go to the funeral. Granddaughter is speaking up, and she says, even if everyone is telling you something is wrong, it's time to tell them to move on. And I skipped a few words there, but that's the idea there. That if you know in your heart what is going on is who you are and what is right, and people are telling you to not be who you are, it's on them. They need to move on. Even if it's a viewpoint they've held for a long time, it's time to move on. Because not only is time moving on, but just they were wrong to begin with. And I know that can be hard to acknowledge for many people, but the thing is, life is full of opportunities to learn. If you do not feel comfortable meeting new people who are different than you, you are fundamentally unequipped to deal with life. And I have no idea how you've gotten through life at this point. If you are this afraid of queer people, you cannot be prepared for life. If about 10% of the population is queer, you are limiting yourself. I don't know how you can possibly live a life when you're uncomfortable with 10% of the population, if not more. But they decide staying together is the path of least resistance, which can be true. Because remember, stronger in numbers is a big deal. That's why people protest in large numbers, to get something done. And just to bring it back to current events again, Disney is the biggest employer in the state of Florida. Like in Disney, for example, they've already cut ties to their campus. One thing they could do even further than that is say, hey, we're cutting off Disney World until the is taken care of. Because what would make a difference here? Because frankly, if your biggest employer in the state tells you we're shutting down, you're going to have thousands of angry people coming after you, if not millions, for the ripple effect. So seriously, Disney, could you be doing more? Corporations in general, can you be doing more? And individuals, what can you do to make a big difference? So returning back to the movie, there's an attack on Sokovia, where it's being signed, and it's very clear this is an attack based in hate. This is an attack based on people who do not like superheroes. This is an attack on those who don't like them, period. And it was based on Bucky, who was being brainwashed. And people can be brainwashed for all sorts of different reasons. Like, Bucky is technically an enhanced individual, but he's been brainwashed, which could be seen as him being in the closet, or, unfortunately, in many cases, still an antagonist. The King of Wakanda, T'Challa, gets so upset he wants to kill Bucky himself personally. But he's talked out of it. Bucky personally knows Steve because they were friends during the war. And even that, Cap gets arrested. And there's this whole line of events due to the fact that Bucky and Steve have known each other and were great friends. We now finally get to talk about Peter Parker. We get to talk about Tom Holland. And the way this is going to happen, the way that they work through this is Tony comes to visit, and he's doing this under the name of a grant. Now, what's actually going on is he's being recruited as a hero, but subtextually what's going on in the queer allegory is Tony has a good cover, so he's not outing Spider-Man, even though he figured it out, which a lot of people do that, so it's interesting. Not even Peter's aunt knows, because remember, he's still scared and he doesn't know what to do. The closest role model he has for this situation is Tony Stark, who's right there. Because in the first Iron Man movie, Tony Stark made his big announcement at the press conference saying, I am Iron Man. And if you think about it in terms of the world, that is like his big coming out moment. Tony Stark was the big trailblazer in this world. Like, remember the time when Elon Musk was being compared to Tony Stark? Like, seriously, can you imagine if Tony Stark bought Twitter and ran it into the ground? Because, he didn't like trans people? No. When Peter Parker's in this situation, he feels a little bit differently. So, what exactly is he going to do? Does he come out? What does he do? Because remember, Peter looks up to these people, especially like Tony Stark. And as seen in the battle later, Peter looks up to these figures. They're important to him. And they are role models, but again, most of them have stayed in the closet for this long. Except for Tony Stark, who's debatably also a narcissist, but that's a whole nother point. So where exactly does Captain America Civil War go on the tier ranking? It's a good movie, but there are better ones on this list, so I want to give it an A tier. I hope you're all okay with that. Now let's talk about Spider-Man Homecoming. So the film starts off with the Vulture, and he's let go of the project after the 2012 Avengers cleanup, because the government wants to take over, and he decides, you know what, I'm just going to steal this alien here. Tom Holland Peter Parker is happy, he's a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, but he still can't get in contact with Tony Stark. For some reason, he's been ghosting after all the events in Civil War. And he felt like he lost a mentor there. That's what was so big going on there. Tony eventually decides to give Peter a new suit. He calls it a minor upgrade, but it's still there. And they even make an alibi video so he doesn't get outed to his aunt. When they're in the car, Tony doesn't really want to hug. He's opening the door and all that sort of stuff. That doesn't sound relevant now, but I'll bring it up later. But yeah, it's been 2 months now, and Peter has not heard back from Tony, and it's really getting him frustrated. Ned's a good friend to him. The two of them are just not socially aware that when they're looking at girls, they're talking about the clothing and not the body, which honestly is better than sexism, so, good on them, I guess. MJ is pretty observant. One of their other classmates pretty observant of this whole thing. And Peter has this problem where he's hiding in back alleys to change. I mean, that's a little bit better, I guess. He keeps losing his backpacks, and Aunt May isn't happy about this. What I appreciate about this Spider-Man, he's the first one to swing around in his suit. And he gets into this fight with people dressed like Avengers in a bank, and then a bodega explodes. This is a dangerous situation, and Aunt May later says, if you ever see this sort of stuff happening, run right away and go far away. Which is okay, is pretty good advice, but then again, she has no idea he's Spider-Man, so there's a lot of confusion here. So Peter tries to reach out to Happy, who's Tony's assistant, because he can't get a hold of Tony. But Happy's very preoccupied because they're going to be moving equipment to Stark Tower in upstate New York instead of in the city of New York, which is an expensive and complicated process because there's all these weapons in there and he's really preoccupied. Peter has all these problems. He can't get a hold of his community and he keeps losing his backpack. These parallel real struggles people who are queer and in the closet face, like hiding your identity, hiding your feelings for other people, stuff like that. It takes a toll on you. It can be a physical toll, a mental toll. It can even be a financial toll. So it's important to keep that in mind. That staying in the closet has consequences in and of itself. And then one day, after Peter's come home from the late night of crime fighting, he crawls in through his window, and what does he see? It's Ned trying to build a Lego Death Star. And this was an accidental outing, like he accidentally outed himself. But guess what? Ned's supportive. And what I really enjoy about these films is how open the characters are about who they are with each other. Now, I'm not saying for the entire world. They don't all have to be Tony Starks. What I'm saying is they're open and have good friends. Ned is a good friend. Ned needs more respect. If you love Ned, let me know down in the comments, because isn't Ned awesome? There's actually a good gay joke in this movie, where Peter's rushing to take off his Spider-Man suit in his bedroom, but Ned's there. And Aunt May walks in, and she sees, oh, Peter's in his boxers with his friend. This is a good joke. Conservatives, take notes. Being queer is not a joke. The reason this joke works is they're not making a joke about being gay. They're not saying, oh, isn't being gay weird? No. They're making a joke that this is an awkward situation and it's not what it looks like. It's not specifically about being gay as a weird thing. The joke does not say that being queer is weird. What it is saying is that this is an awkward situation. If Ned were replaced with like MJ, for example, the joke would still work. But there's an extra layer here, which is the fact that Aunt May is pretty okay with this. She's a little surprised, but not worried. That is a really positive step here. In the first Spider-Man movie with Tobey Maguire, there was that homophobic joke in the wrestling match, but now Aunt May seems to be okay with queer people. Even though it's a misunderstanding, she's okay with it. I'm not saying this is a revolutionary thing. This is the bare minimum, but like still. And since Ned now knows Peter is Spider-Man, he has lots of questions. And this is true for a lot of people who just come out. Cisgender heterosexual people tend to have a lot of questions for queer people. And sometimes they can be a little intrusive, but it depends on the person and what they're comfortable answering. And Ned even asks, can I be your chair guy? At one point he even bursts out that he knows Spider-Man. Which, not a very smart move, but whatever. And about being the chair guy, he's trying to be supportive. There are many ways of being supportive. You can be emotionally supportive, financially supportive. All these sorts of ways you can be supportive. Like, if you know a queer person who's getting kicked out of their house, you can try offering them a place to stay. You can be a good friend if they're going through, if someone's going through troubles with their family, with their community, anything like that, and they're queer, be a good ear to listen on to. You don't have to be queer to be a good person. I also think it's a little funny that the PE videos they're watching in gym class, Cap is technically considered a war criminal now, but yet they're still showing his tapes in PE class. Sort of like how a lot of classes in schools, the videos are wildly out of date. I wonder why. And Peter wants to propose to Liz, another girl in his school, but tries to do it as Spider-Man. Vulture and his crew were trying to sell weapons illegally based on what they sold, but Peter catches on to this and he tries to do something about it. Peter gets rescued by Tony Stark, but it's just the suit. Tony's not actually there. While Peter feels disappointed in this, I somewhat get what's going on. A phone call can be very supportive. And logistically, there are different challenges there, so this is important to discuss there. Tony seems to be trying at the very least. Even the smallest thing you can do, with someone's consent, you can hug them and say it's going to be alright if they're going through a rough time. Because a lot of times queer people, they lose their biological families and they have to find a new found family or a chosen family. You can either help them form a chosen family, support them through their journey, or, how about this, make a family worth choosing. That's the biggest thing you can do if you want to be an ally. Make a family worth choosing. And then they go to Washington, D.C. on a field trip, but Peter wants to sneak out and go see some guys in Maryland. Peter is welcomed back onto the debate team, even though he's missed a ton of meetings because he's been Spider-Man and doing Spider-Man stuff. Peter learns there's a training wheel program in place in the suit, but Ned's able to deactivate that. But Peter is really unprepared for this situation, and he gets overwhelmed and stuck in a container, which then goes to a warehouse. A computer named Kara in a suit, and he talks to her, and he says, "Should I tell Liz I'm Spider-Man?" And the suit encourages him to do so out of a basis of trust. Coming out is always a risk, but when you come out, there are many benefits to coming out as well, if you can get a supportive group there. Then they find out there's some explosive material in Ned's backpack, and Spider-Man comes by to save the day while they're in the Washington Monument. And they try doing the upside down kiss again, but it's a fake out. But Peter does save people at the Washington Monument. Then it's time for the big homecoming dance. And it turns out Liz is Vulture's daughter. And this puts Peter in an awkward situation, which can be true for a lot of queer people. Like, a situation that sort of comes to mind is the movie The Birdcage. And if you want me to review The Birdcage, let me know in the comments down below. I know I'm asking for a lot of comments, but I'm a small creator, so, please help me grow. In the movie The Birdcage, a family with two fathers and a son have to hide when the son announces he's getting engaged and they meet the other family. But the other family is a conservative family, and one of them is a senator. So that's a problem, obviously, because you have a gay couple who runs a nightclub, one of which is a drag queen, and they have to hide who they are to avoid having something go wrong when they introduce each other to the parents. Anyway, yeah, it's not a very comfortable situation for Peter to be in. And then there's a great scene with Donald Glover, which is great. Wow, a lot of community references in this video. And his character here is pretty woke. Peter uses a voice changer on the suit, where his voice becomes super deep. Donald Glover clocks him on that immediately, and Peter keeps insisting, I'm a man. But the thing is, Donald Glover's like, I don't care. Donald Glover, you're woke as hell. Peter tries to rescue people off a boat, but he fails, and then Tony actually is there, in person, and reprimands him and takes the suit away. And this causes even more strife between him and Aunt May, because, well, Aunt May knows he's hiding something, but doesn't know what he's hiding. And he eventually admits to Aunt May that he lost the Stark internship, which is the code for what was going on. And yes, queer people, we have codes all the time, like Friend of Dorothy and Geography Club, stuff like that. They're very clear codes if you know what you're doing. And then Peter gets attention for all the stuff he was getting into, for sneaking off and everything. May's helping him get ready for homecoming. Like, Peter's getting his life on track, but not as Spider-Man. And then the big plot twist is revealed. And here's the thing, Vulture can clearly tell if Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Vulture may not have Peter Tingle or Gagar, but he can tell Peter Tar, I guess. Happy's not really paying attention to the fact that, the weapons are being stolen and everything. So Peter decides to use his original suit, not the one Tony gave him, which he had to give back, but his own suit. And we learn a little bit more about Vulture's intentions here. He's actually kind of a socialist and not happy with Tony Stark, which makes complete sense. Like, Tony Stark kind of screwed him over. And honestly, as a villain, he has a better motive than Thanos. There, I said it. We have to acknowledge the elephant in the room here. Tony Stark gave a multi-billion-dollar weapon to a teenager. Can you imagine what would have happened with Elon Musk? What would happen if Elon Musk gave a multi-million-dollar weapon to a teenager? Do you really think things would have gone well? Do you really think things could have gone any better than they are right now? What I love about this Peter is he doesn't leave the villains to die. He doesn't leave Vulture to just die. He tries to rescue him. What happens in your neighborhood doesn't stay in your neighborhood. So what does being a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man mean? Well, doesn't mean that you only work in your neighborhood. It means you can have your neighborhood as your focus. But remember, there are issues that go beyond the neighborhood. And Liz has to leave again because, her father got arrested and all that. And Peter's offered a better suit. But he decides not to take it because he thinks it's a trap from Tony. But in the end, Tony still gave him the suit. So, oh well, the final post-credit shot there where he's taking off his mask and there's Aunt May and she says, "What the fuck?" So how am I going to rate this movie? To be honest, it all comes down to sort of my opinion on this Spider-Man in particular, Tom Holland. And this may give away my feelings in the end about which Spider-Man's my favorite, but God, I love this movie. So for me, it's going to be an S-tier film. So let's talk about Avengers Infinity War. So with this one, yes, there isn't going to be much of actually talking about Spider-Man in this one, but there's still some stuff to discuss. So it opens up with Hulk saying, "Thanos is coming." And this film features, I think, my favorite Stan Lee cameo, where he's a school bus driver and he says, "What, you kids never seen a spaceship before?" when they're being invaded from space. Peter sees the ship outside and he thinks, "I need the help." And so he tells Ned, "Hey, can you make a distraction so I can get out and do this?" And Ned does that because he's a good friend and a good ally. And there's this thing called the Peter Tingle, which is Spidey sense and all that, but that's what they call it in the MCU. Queer people, we have a similar thing going on here, which is, well, it doesn't really have that. It's more like it's not a queer tingle, it's more like a sixth sense that we need to develop to know when we're safe or unsafe in a situation. It's just something a lot of us develop because, well, we have to. It's a matter of safety for us. Thanos wants to wipe out half the human population. When Thanos' henchmen come down to the planet, they're honestly surprised that people of Earth don't want to be killed. They call their lives worthless and don't see the value in their lives that they have. And that is a powerful statement of itself, that even though it's not a direct parallel, just saying that, there are people in this world who don't understand that being queer is a great way to live. Sure, there are hard points in there, but it can be a rich, fulfilling life. And there are people who don't understand. They think our lives are worthless or worth less than that of cisgender heterosexuals simply because of who we are. And no, that's not the case. The world may be hard on us, but that doesn't mean that we don't live a rich, fulfilling life. There's a part here where Hulk, Bruce Banner, can't become the Hulk. He can't transform into the green monster he is, and he won't come out because he's too afraid to. Is there a point to what I'm saying here? Yes, but we'll discuss that for the next film. And Peter eventually goes into space and he passes out without air, but the suit saves him, and Tony wants to send Peter back, but he doesn't go back. And I really also love the scene where Thor and Gamora are talking to each other, and they talk about how families can be rough instead of attacking each other, which is really beautiful, and it can show the importance of found family here. Because for a lot of queer people, we have to go for our found families, because families we're born with aren't good to us. And it can be unsafe, or even deadly. So, found family or chosen family gives you the freedom to be yourself and still be loved. Vision has a stone in his head which Thanos wants. So they have this discussion of, what do we do here? And he says, do we lay our lives down? What he's saying is there really a choice in this matter? And the point I'm trying to articulate here is that when you're under attack, you often don't have a choice but to fight back. And I mean that really, that When our rights are being threatened, we can't sit idly by and let them be taken away. We need to take action, protest, do anything you can to make sure that we're protected. In a less eloquent way, Vision is saying we don't really have a choice. We need to do what we gotta do to survive. And Vision has a good point there. Back to Spider-Man, when Tony asks him, why aren't you staying in our neighborhood that needs protection? Peter says, you can't be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man if there's no neighborhood. And he has a great point there that whatever happens locally is bigger broadly, and vice versa. So, you can't separate your neighborhood from everywhere else. Everything is linked. Big communities, small communities, they're all connected. What affects one affects another. So, it's important to have a good balance of people there who want to have a big influence and a smaller influence. And it's important to have people who are fighting on a larger scale and on a smaller scale because both make important differences. But remember, if your big scale is under attack, what's going to happen to the small scale? Like Gamora and Thor are interesting examples here because they feel like they don't have any other options, and they might not. Which a lot of people start to fight when they have no further options left. And I can understand why, because fighting is hard. It really is. It's not an easy thing to do. But it's also important to remember it's a good idea to fight before, if you are able to as well. There are warning signs for when danger is looming. And speak up, because you could be next. This film brings up a lot of interesting questions, like the concept of sacrifice and losing. While it's good to see in this film Peter and Tony actually working together, this was a hard film to watch because if you've seen the film before, Spider-Man gets dusted away by Thanos. It's still a very rough scene to watch, even though I know what happens in the next film, that it's still hard to watch. Like Captain America represents America. Spider-Man represents the ability in all of us to do the right thing, even when it's hard. And when Peter blipped away, that really was a notable moment where it showed how tough it was for Peter. When Peter blipped away, it signaled to the audience that this idea of being a good person in hard times is gone. And of course, that's not the case. But it does signal something powerful, a loss of hope. And frankly, in times like now, it is easy to lose hope. But just remember, you're not alone in this. It may seem like there's no one in your community who is there for you, but there's probably at least one person who can help you. And even that, there's lots and lots of people outside your community who will love and accept you for who you are. And I know that's not an easy decision to make, and I know many of you can't make this decision, but that's the world we live in. The decision is being made for us. And what are we going to do about it? Are we going to fight or stick through it? I love this film, and frankly, I'm going to give it an S tier, because it's my rating, not yours. Let's talk about Avengers Endgame. It opens up with Hawkeye losing his family. It was done literally in the blink of an eye. There's a parallel here for the LGBT community. There are lots of things plaguing us that lead to early death, which can be sudden and scary. AIDS is a big killer even today. Even though there have been many medical advances, it's still a deadly disease. Suicide is another issue that affects our community in wide numbers. And murder as well, that we get killed a lot as well. It can be hard being queer and being in the queer community because it is scary. And it is hard. We lose people a lot. The world is a dangerous and scary place to be queer. It's important to stick with our communities. For even as small as they are still there for us. Then there's Tony on the ship, and there's a hopelessness as he drifts off through space, and that he feels he's going to die out there. Although Captain Marvel ends up saving him, and he goes back to Earth, and they really start to feel the impact of losing half the population in the world. Trillions died across the universe, and it shows the impact of loss of life. Frankly, I'm gonna say something here, it's going to be rough to hear, but it's something that needs to be said. People are gonna die because of these anti-trans and anti-queer bills that are coming out in the United States. Murder and suicide, especially, are gonna be big killers here. And if you feel like you're on that edge there, I've included some links in the description for you can get some help. Because remember, your life has meaning. Your life has value. And no one should be able to take that away from you. Society should not be able to dictate that you're less than. Because you're not. You are worthy of care. You are worthy to live. You are worthy of happiness. So they decide to go after Thanos. Thanos gets decapitated because Thor misses shot earlier. And this was what he felt like he needed to do to win. But in reality, it didn't do anything. And the stones are gone. They've been changed into atoms. And Thanos has the line, "I am inevitable." If Thanos here represents hatred and violence, is he in fact inevitable? Or can we choose our own path? I know Dr. Strange said there was only one way of doing this. But in our real world, we need to know that we dictate our own path here. And it's important to fight. 5 years, and then 5 years later have passed. And it's very clear a lot of people have lost hope. And it's hard for a lot of people. And the world is on standstill. It's interesting because after this movie came out in our real world, we had a global pandemic, which killed millions of people. Granted, it wasn't to the same degree as Thanos' snap, but I think it's interesting to compare where we're at as time goes on, because there's a certain percentage of the population who never gave a shit, and there's still a population who doesn't give a shit that people have died. But then again, these are the same sort of people who don't care about mass shootings and kids killing themselves because they're queer. Remember, these are evil people, and Captain America's running a support group, and in this support group, he is listening to a man who talks about a date he went on with another man, and even through all this, it should be noted that Thanos did not wipe out all the queer people, because, he's less evil than Ron DeSantis. Cap is great with that, he's an ally, so you have no excuse, regardless of your age. And it makes me even question, does homophobia really even exist in the MCU? At least in this iteration of it. There's very clear examples of queerness being there, at least subtly. That there's this character here, and that thing that happened with Peter in Homecoming. So it's is homophobia even rampant here? That may sound a little strange, but it's just a question that's popped into my head. And then Ant-Man comes back because of science stuff. Ant-Man asks, what happened here to a kid? Because he sees how empty the world is. And the kid just stares at him. I just try to think about this in our real world equivalent. Because I'm trying to think, seriously, if someone looks around and sees a bunch of people wearing masks in our real world, and they ask, why is everyone wearing a mask? I'm gonna first assume that they're an anti-masker, because that's what anti-maskers have been talking about all this time. Can you imagine if Trump was president during Infinity War? Imagine how bad that would have been. Yeah, things would have been a whole lot worse. But also think about it. They would be doing those terrible impressions of him, and where he would call the Avengers losers and cowards and claim he could beat Thanos on his own. And honestly, isn't that a little on the nose? And then there's this meeting with the Avengers, and Carol, who's Captain Marvel, says that she's helping other planets throughout the universe, and tells them that there are a lot of problems and they don't have the Avengers there to help. Which is a really profound statement there, because oftentimes, even in this video, I've been talking a lot about America and how LGBT plus rights are being threatened here, but they're really being threatened all over the world. It's important to think about it that way because this isn't a uniquely American struggle. Rights are being taken away all across the world, and it's important to remember that. Then Ant-Man shows up at the Avengers headquarters, and he explains that for him it felt like 5 hours, and it was just as bad for him because he didn't even have a cell phone or anything. And they discover that this van can go to the quantum realm and become a time machine. But in this time, Tony has also developed a daughter and he doesn't want to lose her, which is understandable. So they decide, let's go to Hulk. And he's now this sort of fusion between his Bruce Banner self and the Hulk as we knew. And the way I like to interpret this is that he's come to terms with who he is. Because in the first Avengers movie, he says, I'm always angry. But in this movie, he's come to terms with who he is. Yeah, he's still angry all the time. But now he's more at peace with that. He understands that he's angry and in more control of it, which is sort of a beautiful statement. And it's also a way of showing, like, he came out and is comfortable with himself and is better for it. Because a lot of things do change over the course of 5 years. 5 years ago, I thought I was a straight man. And look at how wrong I was. And I would put a picture here of me, but, like, I don't want to do that. I'm uncomfortable with that. And Hulk describes it as being the best of both worlds. Which, you know what that means? Hulk is non-binary. And I love that. Tony discovers something with the Mobius strip after doing dinner, and his daughter says, I love you 3,000. If you're one of my subscribers, or want to subscribe now, I love you 3,000. Also, could you imagine Elon Musk discovering time travel? Like, seriously. Why did we ever think that Elon Musk and Tony Stark were comparisons to each other? Tony, as shown in good faith with Captain America to bury the hatchet they had at Civil War, gives him his shield. Because in the end, they now know what the true fight is. And how important that is. And then the crew goes to visit Thor, who's gained some weight, and they fat shame him a lot, which is really problematic. It's also understandable that Thor has some serious reservations about the word Thanos being said in his house, which makes sense. He has serious trauma around that. It's clear that not only was he depressed, but Clint also was really depressed. Hawkeye was really depressed. Because, like as I mentioned in the earlier part of this video with Amazing Spiderman, men, when they get depressed, can be violent. Not in all cases, and it's not something to brush away or to ignore, but it is something that can happen to a lot of men, and it's very clear that they're both depressed and dealing with it in different ways. And I just love this quote from Captain America, look out for each other. This is the fire of our lives. We're gonna win, whatever it takes. And frankly, I kind of want this to be a big rallying point cry for queer people as well. When we're fighting for our rights, this is something to remember over and over again, that we fight. This is what we're fighting for. It is a fight for our lives. And when we put in that context, we can fight. We can do this. And they go back in time to the timeline of the first Avengers film, and some of the Doctor Strange characters are there, and I think it's sort of an interesting allegory when you think, queer people, we've always been here, even if you've never seen us. Trans people especially, we've been there and you didn't notice us. And Nebula, who admits that she was working for Thanos earlier in that time, is an important message to have of, like, a lot of times before we come out, there's a certain percentage of queer people before they came out were homophobic, possibly transphobic, because they were projecting a lot. And I'm not saying that's okay, but there's a lot of work to be done after that to make sure that you do the right thing for your community. Frankly, when you feel like the world is against you, another thing to remember is that bigots are idiots. They really are. Like, when Captain America goes into the elevator and he says, "Hail Hydra," it just shows how easy these bad guys are easy to trick. If you haven't seen them before, go to Reddit and look at Accidental Allies, because it is such a beautiful form there, and it's really fun. Transphobes and other bigots make mistakes because they're so dumb, and it's a good way to laugh it off. Anyway, Nebula gets caught because there's a link between her current self and her past self, and there's this nice touch where Thor's mother is able to recognize him because his eyes changed, because he had to get that replaced. And Thor reaches out his arm, and he gets his hammer, And he realizes he's still worthy throughout all this. Because remember, it's not your size that makes you worthy. It's not about where you're at emotionally. It's about your innate quality. And remember, queer people, you're worthy. You are worthy. And Tony and Steve partner up to go get Pym particles, and then Tony runs into his father, and that's also a really touching moment. And at this time, Steve runs into Peggy as well, and he misses her a lot. And he'll get back to that. Clint and Natasha, who paired off. Natasha ends up sacrificing herself to get the stone. And these people really loved each other. And then Hulk reverses the snap and brings all these people back 5 years later. And then Clint gets a phone call. And this brings up a few interesting questions here. Like, it makes me think, like, did he pay for her phone plan all this time? And also, did he leave her phone out in the middle of the grass? Like, what's going on there? Like when she got blipped, like, did he just leave her phone in the grass, like, to just, like, leave it there? And then she just picked it up and it had a full battery 5 years later? Although, it is a little bit weird because, like, what also counts in the blip? As we see in WandaVision, which I'm not talking about in this video, we actually get to see them come back. And when they get blipped away and blipped back, that we see that they're still wearing their clothes. So, like, the clothes get blipped away as well. So, like, what counts and what doesn't count when it comes to blipping? I don't know. Just as that sort of moment happens, the compound gets blown up. The Avengers compound gets blown up. And past Thanos is there as the antagonist. And to be honest, I feel like this is sort of a weird thing. Because this Thanos is not the same Thanos from the last film. So for me, it sort of feels a little weird, as if they're sort of different antagonists. Just my opinion, though. So Thor, Captain America, and Iron Man are looking out at Thanos, and they know it's a trap, but they want to kill him properly this time. And then there's a big moment in this big battle where they realize Cap is in fact worthy. We can lift Thor's hammer, and Cap is indeed worthy. And you know what this shows? As shown earlier in the film, Captain America is not a homophobe. So therefore, if you're a homophobe, you are not worthy of picking up this fictional hammer. And Steve's shield breaks, which would be this really big moment of all hope is lost. But Cap gets up again. And he doesn't need to say, I can do this all day. Because we know what he means there. His reputation precedes him. He can do this all day. And literally every hero you can think of comes out there. Except for DC and, like, the X-Men. Because, you know, copyright. And finally, Cap says these two famous words that we've been waiting for all this time. Avengers! Assemble! Here's the thing. They're already there. They've already assembled. A more appropriate thing to say would have been, like, Avengers, go! But, you know, that would have been too logical and, frankly, not as cool. And then Tony sees Peter, and he's finally ready to hug him. Because remember, back at the beginning of Homecoming, he was just trying to open the door. He was not trying to hug Peter, but now he's ready. Honestly, I may have cried a lot, and one of the best moments of this scene the fight scene I can think of is when Wanda sees Thanos. She says, you took everything from me, and Thanos says, I don't even know who you are. And that's the thing. Many of the lawmakers who try to take over our rights don't even give a about who we are. That's important to recognize here. They don't see us as people. And therefore, we need to show them that we are in fact people. And that's what peaceful protest is all about. Fighting. And then Tony sacrifices himself in the end. And it calls back to what Thanos was saying about, I am inevitable. And guess what Tony says? And I am Iron Man. And he snaps his fingers. Boom! Thanos' army disappears. What I like about this as sort of a queer allegory is it's like a bigot saying something along the lines of, Jesus is judging you for your lifestyle, and the response is, I am a homosexual. Because really, in this world, Tony Stark has been a trailblazer for superhero rights, if you really think hard about it, because arguably one of the first people to have a public address announcing who he was. So when you put it in that context, like, he is a real trailblazer. They're really strong, powerful last words. Also, could you imagine if this was Elon Musk. In our universe, Elon Musk throws a tantrum on Twitter every day because there are trans people on the internet. And in this universe, he's saving trillions of lives. And Peter's there when he dies, and he says, "We won." And I love the speech at the end from Tony about inclusivity and all that because, well, that's part of life. As you learn and live your life, you get exposed to more people. That should be a beautiful thing to be celebrated, not torn apart. I saw this in theaters. I wept. I wept now watching the funeral scene, and it's sort of funny. Could you imagine Elon Musk's funeral? Like, I won't shed a tear when Elon Musk dies, but I cry like a baby when Tony Stark died. That just shows how of a person Elon Musk is. Happy's there for Morgan and talks about how much her father loved cheeseburgers, and it just made me cry. And Thor makes Valkyrie the king of Wakanda. And he's very clear about that. If you're not, and if you don't believe me, rewatch the end of the movie because he uses the word king, which in the queer community, when you're referring to someone who is a woman, a king, that's a pretty queer code thing, especially considering in the past Thor movie that they cut out the part where she came out as bi. So Steve had to return the stones to the other universe, and he stayed behind with Peggy after returning the stones because, well, he wanted to have a happy life. And Steve decides to pass the shield over to Sam, the Falcon. And it's beautiful. Even though Sam doesn't think he can accept it, it's still beautiful. And remember, there will always be people who carry on the cause, even if they're reluctant to do so. And ultimately, what I hope people get from this film is why people come out in the first place. The reason people come out is because of love. Whether it's love for others or love for themselves. That's why people come out. Love. Love is the answer. And I know I sound like a hippie for saying that, but trust me, it's true. And I mean, despite its flaws, I still love this movie, so I'm putting it S tier. So then we get Spider-Man Far From Home. And so the world is grieving the loss of Tony Stark. And frankly, I don't see a reality in which Elon Musk will be grieved like that, so. And this movie has probably the best intro of almost any movie I've ever seen, which is I Will Always Love You by Whitney Houston. Over this, very cheesy slideshow there. Very touching, beautiful. But the main plot of the film is Peter and his class are going on a trip to Venice. One thing I have to point out here is, where are they getting the money for this? Because, think about it, half the population just came back after 5 years. What's going on? Is there serious deflation going on? Is there really high demand to travel to perhaps see family? I don't know. What could be going on? Because I imagine the blip just would not do well for the economy. So I'm like, how could they possibly afford to send an entire class on a trip to Venice? And at this point, Aunt May is very supportive of Peter. Peter, as Spider-Man, is helping Aunt May do charities to help displace people from the blip. Peter has public speaking issues, which is a very common thing for people to have. And you want to know what my advice is? So here's a segment I like to call Sally Gives Advice. So, you want to know my advice on how to deal with public speaking? I hope you said yes, because I can't hear you. Forget the advice about imagining people in their underwear, because that's terrible. 3 things can happen in that situation. Laughter, arousal, or jealousy, none of which are good ideas. So, my recommendation is imagine everyone fully clothed, but they're wearing Crocs and socks. Now, don't you feel morally superior now? Seriously, what's stopping you from giving that big speech now? That's my advice. Don't sue me if it doesn't work for you. Thank you. And then Happy and Peter are talking, and Happy reminds Peter, you do not want to ghost Nick Fury when he's calling you, because he does not respond well for that. They're on the trip, and Flash orders some alcohol, and he has to be called out that he's actually 16, not 21. He got blipped and everything. But here's the thing. I imagine people would have thought about this when drafting the laws or amending the laws. I imagine in this case they would have just raised the drinking age to 26 and then lower each sequential year afterwards, which may sound like an odd choice and frankly kind of unfair to those in the 21 to 26 crowd, but that's the reality of things of can you actually be sure if someone blipped or not? That's how you figure out. And also, wouldn't Flash's ID have an expiration date and an issue date on it? Wouldn't that therefore tell you when the ID was issued, making that sort of little void? And then Peter and Ned try to do the switching seats so they could sit with the girls they want, but that doesn't work because the teachers try to block that idea. And then Ned talks about how he's falling for Betty. And then they go to the airport and there's a suitcase check. And when they open up Peter's suitcase, they see the Spider-Man suit right there. And they don't think anything of it. That they just see, no, you can't bring a banana in. Which is really a reassuring story because there's a parallel here for when I was starting my transition. There was the time where I wasn't fully out socially and all that, and I would pack like my more feminine clothes and my boobs in my suitcase. Because frankly, I didn't want TSA, asking me a lot of questions. Because my ID didn't match up and all that sort of stuff. So when I did that, there were a few times my bag got pulled out of circulation and they had to open it up. And I had to have a little discussion with them about what was in my bag. A note to my trans femmes in the audience. Silicone breast forms can set off the x-ray machine. So keep that in mind before you look surprised. And what this sort of shows here is that yeah, there is risk in coming out as Spider-Man, but really, he has allies, and most people wouldn't care. And like a real field trip, this field trip pretty much has no academic merit. It's supposed to be a science trip, apparently, but they don't do anything with that. Like, they don't even realize that the museum they were going to visit was closed. So, like, I guess it's just like any other field trip. There's just no academic merit to it. Then there's, like, this fight with a water creature. Happy is now volunteering to like help displace people so he can get closer to Aunt May, who he has feelings for and they're seeing sort of. And then Nick Fury hits Ned with a tranquilizer because Nick Fury's there and he wants to help. He didn't want to talk to Peter at the funeral because that wouldn't be an appropriate time. So apparently Tony Stark left some glasses for Peter, which sounds like a really bad idea. I mean, he's still a teenager and you're giving him multi-billion-dollar weapons technology, like defense satellites and the ability to read other people's texts. I know the arc from the last few movies, but still, this seems really unrealistic and really problematic. Can you imagine what would have happened if Elon Musk gave multi-billion-dollar weapons technology to a teenager? Can you imagine what would have happened? He probably would still have Twitter, but still. And then Peter meets Quentin Beck, who is fighting that water monster, and who's not from this Earth. And he gets frustrated because, like, Nick Fury hijacked his vacation, but, like, you're a superhero, you're an Avenger. And then Brad, one of the kids on the field trip, Brad, tries taking a picture with Peter changing and make it look like a sexual thing going on, but really it's not. And then Beck decides to go by Mysterio, which is the name the kids came up with, which is interesting. Someone who they can talk to about superhero stuff. And that's one of the powers of queer communities, is we can discuss things that we have personal experience with, and how... And that could be a really beautiful thing because, well, it's hard to find other people who have this common experience. Then there's this opera they go to, but Peter escapes and all that sort of stuff. And Fury pretty much goes after Peter and says, look, are you going to stand up for what's right or not? But it turns out Mysterio's been manipulating Peter this entire time. And when he tries on the glasses, he looks like Tony, so Peter transfers it over him, but it was all a trick. The water monster, everything was a trick. People in the pub they were visiting were all fake and actors and all that, so it's like, wow. And he wanted revenge because Tony Stark ruined his life. Which, honestly, capitalism. Capitalism is the problem. Now, if Mephisto were actually a good friend of Spider-Man, he wouldn't have just accepted the glasses like that. What he should have done was say, hey, these glasses were given specifically to you. You should respect and honor that and comfort him through that, but without accepting the glasses. I feel like that would have been what a true friend would have done in this case. Then the field trip is over because, they were all put in danger. I don't think they canceled the trip where they went to the Washington Monument and things fell apart because, that was okay, but this was not. And then MJ figures out that Peter is Spider-Man, which is from obvious behavior and stuff like that. He tries to deny it, but honestly, sometimes we're the last person to know we're queer, and it can be sort of interesting when people figure this out for us. But again, don't tell someone you think they're queer. Let them come out to you. And then Peter gets tricked again by thinking he's seeing Fury, but no, it turns out it's actually Mephisto doing a trick again. Mephisto even tries using the line, "If you were good enough, Tony would still be alive." And that's not what's going on there, because frankly, Tony saved everyone. Tony chose that, not them, but still, and he of course, gets tricked into revealing which friends know, and so they're also in danger. And he wakes up in jail, but can just easily walk out. And he gets some help from a local person in the village there, and good thing he knows Happy's phone number by memory, because if he didn't remember anyone's phone number, that would have really turned out badly. And he has to test and make sure he's actually the real Happy. And as a side note, it's a good idea to get your friends involved in something like this, to say, hey, if there's ever a case where I can't trust my eyes and stuff like that, we need to come up with a secret question that if I ask you what's something only you would know, you know the exact response to. And then Happy plays some music, although Peter can't tell the difference between Cher and Madonna. I mean, come on. And one thing that's interesting to point out here is when Happy comes to rescue his friends, he says, I work with Spider-Man. He doesn't say, I work with Peter Parker. There's a difference there. And that's what's powerful, because he's not outing him. Even through all this, he's not outing him. And in the end, they tell Nick Fury, you'll have to talk, that Peter will call you. And that's going to take some getting used to, but he'll get used to it. And Peter and MJ started dating, and then Ned and Betty broke up. But then Peter gets outed based on a recording of Mephisto and all that. And guess who's there to report? J.K. Simmons. And also turns out Nick Fury's not real. So, yeah. Nick Fury's has an imposter there. Is this a great movie? Yeah. I'd say it's A tier, so that's where I'm going to put it. But this is a fun movie, and in the next one we're going to be talking about various stuff like outing and stuff like that for a little bit, but also other broader things. And finally, let's talk about Spider-Man No Way Home. So Peter's been outed, and that can be dangerous. The whole world knows, and it wasn't by his choice. Violence comes about when people are outed. Happy and May break up, and there's this joke with MJ and Peter in his room where Peter's in his boxers again, similar to how in the first one was Ned there. It's another case of May being supportive. In fact, she even has a more outright discussion this time about sex and all that, briefly in the film. But it turns out that's not what was going on, because he's being tracked by helicopters. And people jump to conclusions about what Peter did or didn't do. And they call him a murderer. And there are federal agencies now open, and he's under investigation. And they all have this same sort of, I'm not talking until I get a lawyer sort of spiel, because that's what you should do. And then May gets arrested under suspicion of child endangerment for this. And frankly, is that any more different than the Florida laws? Like, seriously? And their lawyer is Murdoch. And he says none of this stuff should really stick. And apparently Happy's under investigation too for a bunch of different stuff. But that's a whole other point. And a brick is thrown through the window, but Murdoch is able to catch it. And what's important to note here is the bricks would still be thrown even if it wasn't Peter's fault publicly, as it's known. Because people are going to be mad regardless. So keep that in mind. But they end up going to Happy's apartment because it's safer and it's more secure. Ned, MJ, and Peter all apply to MIT, and they're all hoping to get in, but they keep getting rejections. And Peter's talking about how he loved the week when he was out to MJ, but no one else. And that's really powerful because we decide who we come out to. And Peter gets welcomed back to school, and there's a debate among staff about whether he's a murderer or not. And as a side note, why is Peter going back to school? Like, it's dangerous to do that, right? And then one of the teachers made a display case for him and everything, and then says the other teacher is a conspiracy theorist, which makes sense because in this reality, the Daily Bugle is more like a tabloid and like Alex Jones sort of thing, so like that makes complete sense that they would call it a conspiracy theory. They all get rejections from MIT, and it was because of enlightened certain controversies. But Flash gets in, although it's interesting that Peter's still able to live his life, walk down the street and everything. Or maybe that's just New York. It might have a lot of supporters, but it may just be New York, that people just don't care in New York. And then Peter tries to go see Doctor Strange to see if he can undo it, even though he's no longer the Sorcerer Supreme and all this sort of stuff. And just my thing here is, you should really say no in this case. Doctor Strange should say no. He is the adult and the one casting the magic here. He could have said, I don't care that you and your friends didn't get into college. That's not important enough to use magic on. But no, he can't do that. Of course, Peter didn't know he could reconsider and stuff like that. And the spell goes wrong, and all these villains from past movies appear there, like Doc Ock, Green Goblin, Sandman, and Electro all show up. And it turns out that they all appeared shortly after they died, which explains the timing there. And they decide we can't send them back because they're going to die. Peter sends Doctor Strange into another dimension, which Doctor Strange obviously isn't a fan of. Electro is in here. This means that we have our second canonically queer character in the MCU, not including Eternals. But one thing that came to my mind is something a little strange here is... Where is Gwen Stacy? Seriously, where is Gwen Stacy? She died as well, and she knew Peter Parker was Spider-Man. So where was she? Oh wait, you didn't want to bring that up? And they bring all these villains over to Happy's apartment because that sounds like a brilliant idea, and then they try to fix them or help them, which I don't like that language because that implies something's wrong there. Yes, they're villains, but there is something deeper going on there. It's not like you just flip a switch and change them. It's not how any of this works, except in the MCU where it actually kind of works. And things go badly because of course they do. And then the Goblin attacks the building. Then May's hurt and he says, it's not my responsibility if they die when they go back. And May says, with great power comes a great responsibility. We're bringing it back, folks. Because think about it this way. May is making the point here of it is important to be the better person in the room. And then she dies. And MJ and Ned are waiting for Peter, but it turns out Ned has some powers because of the ring he got from Doctor Strange. And he brings in a portal and he gets Andrew Garfield, and then Tobey Maguire shows up. And they've had their own journeys as well. They've had some growth and everything. So there's some beautiful stuff there. And they're all able to comfort Peter, the one from the MCU, about what he's going through because they've lived it before. That's the power of a queer community. We can fight together. And for a while, Garfield got bitter and angry, but he learned to manage that. And Tobey Maguire tried to hunt down the man he originally tried to kill in the first Spider-Man movie. But things did not get better because of that. But Tobey also agrees you need to cure them all, so there's an interesting point there. They go to the chemistry lab at their high school, and it's like, what high school chemistry lab has all this stuff? Like, seriously? The Tobey Maguire Spider-Man and Mary Jane made it work. And Tobey even keeps the suit under his clothes and everything, just in case. And then they go to the Statue of Liberty, where a shield's being built to honor Captain America. Peter tries to explain to the Daily Bugle how he's doing the right thing, but really, why? You're not going to convince any of them. And then they have to talk about the webs and everything, because it's interesting, because Tobey Maguire Spider-Man's the only one who can produce webs from his wrist. And then Tobey Maguire telling Andrew Garfield he's amazing. Now when Electro comes here, Andrew Garfield Spider-Man actually wants to talk to Max. Frankly, I don't blame him, given how badly that ended, but still, like, why? And also another point here. Shouldn't Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire Spider-Man be, like, older? Doesn't this sort of imply they died relatively young? Pretty dark, isn't it? And they also don't know what the Avengers are, which is pretty funny. And I love how the three of them work together. Tobey Maguire Spider-Man is a compassionate Spider-Man. Andrew Garfield Spider-Man is the smart one. And Tom Holland Spider-Man is the team player. He knows how to make them work as a group because of his experience in the Avengers. And then Strange comes back. He's somehow impressed that Peter's plan is actually working and that Ned could operate a portal. And then Electro says he's a little bit surprised that there isn't a black Spider-Man there, but there should be a black Spider-Man somewhere. And Doc Ock seems to be happy to reconnect with his Peter. And Andrew Garfield Spider-Man saves MJ, which is sort of like a redemption for him. She's okay, but she checks in on him being okay as well, which is sweet. And Tom Holland Spider-Man wants to kill him himself, but Tobey Maguire stops him until Tobey Maguire gets stabbed, and then Tom Holland kills him anyway. So, like, Peter makes the ultimate sacrifice in the end, where he loses all of his connections. Everyone forgets he's Spider-Man. And even Steven admits he loves Peter in that moment. And he gives him a few moments to say goodbye. And MJ and Ned try to make him promise that he'll come and see them afterwards and tell them he's Spider-Man and everything, and he says, I promise. But here's the thing. How exactly is that going to work out? Like, he's going to go over them and say, hey, I'm Spider-Man, we're supposed to be friends, and you're supposed to be my girlfriend? that's a bit creepy, so it's like, how exactly was this supposed to go down? And then there's J. Jonah Jameson's commentary, that only a coward hides their identity and true intentions, after the fact that, no, he doesn't know what Spider-Man's true identity is, meaning he was never going to be supportive of him in the first place. And Ned and MJ don't know who he is at all, so it's really sad. And then he goes to visit May's tombstone, and Happy's there. And he might be thinking how, and it's still Spider-Man, but apparently he doesn't know Spider-Man's identity. And he lost a good friend for what he stood for. He's referring to Tony. Is the hope really gone? And the closing message of the film is, what can you do when the heroes are gone? You can become a hero. And this Spider-Man kept fighting on, even if no one knew who he was. Just remember the core message of this film. What are you going to do when the heroes are gone? Choose to do the right thing. That is the great power and responsibility of coming out. Oh, and how do I rate this film? I'm going to say it's an S-tier film. I know it has its problems, but I just freaking love it. So this is a bit embarrassing, but I forgot to record the section where I talk about my favorite Spider-Man. My favorite Spider-Man is Tom Holland, and the reason for that is I feel like he encapsulates the best qualities of each of them. His compassionate side, the intelligence that he has, and that he really does make an effort to be the best possible hero he can be. So he's my favorite. So if you've gotten this far, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you subscribe and like this video. Leave a respectful comment, all that sort of stuff. It took me a long time to put this together. It took me a long time to write this, a long time to put this together, so thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Goodbye.